the guitar like sketches, so I kind of because I'm here as a hobby. That would just be mid-service. Yeah, I'm worried it's still heavy, but whatever.
It's all a bit fucked, isn't it? I mean, really, I know he would have loved, again, the ripper opening AC/DC song and given us another huge big thumbs up for that one. Rock in peace indeed, Nick. This beautiful venue, just up the road from our home these last 6 years, filled with familiar faces and love. The party pies, cakes, lollies, twisties we'll be scoffing down later to keep warm. He'd love all of that too, especially the lollies. But it's pretty unbelievable that we're here, having to farewell such a beautiful, funny and kind-hearted human being like Nick, just simply far too soon. It's truly beyond belief. But with that said, on behalf of myself, Nick's parents, Wendy and Dave, his two incredible sons, Nicholas and Jasper, and their mum, Caitlin, we sincerely thank you all for being here today to show your love and respect for Nick and to offer your support to those of us closest to him throughout his short but very full and rich life. For those of you that may not have met me, my name is Pia Sims and I'm a funeral celebrant director, and today, as per last week and most days recently, I'm pretty heavily medicated. So Nick was my best friend. He was my housemate, my nesting partner, and so much more for the last almost 6 years. We're even business partners for a stint as well with our funky little Betty's Red Star Cafe, and I know how much it had meant to Nick to see some very special regulars from Betty's here today. Nick and I are absolute soulmates in the truest sense of the word, but a bit more about that later. Today I might not be on my most professional game, as best I could be, standing behind this lectern, or even a bit later as we're all catching up. So I do apologise if I kind of glaze over and vague out in the distance. Just know it's nothing personal. It's been a really big couple of weeks for us all. I sincerely want to thank you all for your patience and understanding again, as we, as a family, and combined with me in the roles of mortician, funeral director and celebrant, took some much needed time to process Nick's sudden and tragic passing back in May, just allowing us the time to fully prepare as best we could for both today's local memorial service here with you and the Melbourne service held in his old stomping ground, High Street, Thornbury, last Friday. Before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping. Just make sure those phones are turned to silent. Thank you very much. Please don't be that person. If you miss them on the way in, the loos are located outside, just kind of around to your right as you exit the coach house here. The big grey boxes, you won't miss them. If you didn't get to leave a note for Nick and the little black memorial book on your way in, please do try and track it down at some point this afternoon. It'll be floating around, so no rush. Maybe write a few words about Nick, anything. Something about the terribly bad jokes he may have told you, or the even worse coffees he may have served you. His views on politics, maybe about the property he helped you sell or buy. Even a cute little picture, cock and balls, his favourite. Whatever, just a little something for us to look back on and remember today with some smiles as we appreciate every one of you who has come here to join us in celebrating Nick's life today. And the last 6 years spent in this amazing region. Just make sure that the ink has dried, because we'd hate to ruin any cock and ball masterpieces. At the conclusion of today's official ceremony here in the coach house, we'll head outside, make our way over to the stable undercover area, sharing some refreshments, plenty of chats, memories, laughs and tears about Nick. But please do be mindful that there are some here today with compromised immune systems or just simply can't afford to get sick. So be aware that some may be a bit more cautious of the old COVID and whatnot than others. So if the big hugs aren't forthcoming or someone politely declines, just please understand and be sure to respect their personal space and choices today. Thank you, everyone. and to every single one of you that contributed to the GoFundMe campaign to get us across the line. Thank you, all of you. You absolute fucking legends. The gratitude from us all is beyond words. We are just so sincerely humbled by the amount of love for Nik and the generosity shown by so many. Kieran and Sue, I can't adequately express my gratitude to you both for so generously allowing us to be here today at this beautiful property and the assistance in the lead up to today. And the members of Kingston CFA and family, of course, who have helped me in countless ways in not only making today come together and happen, but just generally helping me so much this last month or so. Thanks must also go to Eric and Leslie at the Creswick Bakery and Steve at the IGA for their generous contributions for today's wake, food and refreshments following the service. And also Libby, Jackie, team at Natural Grace for their willingness and support in allowing me to care and prepare for Nik's body, assisting for me to arrange him to come home for Ballarat and to oversee his cremation. And of course, our ace mate Alex in Melbourne for his help in compiling the visual tributes we'll be getting to watch throughout the ceremony. A labour of love which is forever appreciated and cherished. Now, today's presentations may not be brought to you quite as professionally as last week, but given the technological and spatial challenges, I do hope we manage to enjoy them on the screen. Speaking of photos and such, Scott James Prebble. Yeah, you boy. My dear friend and talented photographer based in Ballarat. Thank you for filming here today, and equally as appreciated, your insistence and persistence over the years in managing to get Nik in front of the camera. No easy feat, as his family will attest to. But those shots of Nik and I that you've captured are just so special, and I thank you for allowing him the space to feel confident, or at least comfortable enough with you to give it a go. But you, as you do, captured something in him that he's never allowed anyone to capture before, and we get to keep those moments. And that's priceless. Love you, my friend. And a big welcome to anyone who's watching via Facebook. Big hello to you all, and thanks for joining us today. I hope that the quality of sound and vision are suitable for you all to feel a part of today. We are out in the wild here, so our apologies if the connection drops out or whatever. But as mentioned, Scott is filming today, and he'll compile something totally magical for us to all watch at a later date. Please rest assured over the next few days, as mentioned, that links to the various visual tributes and slideshows will be popped up on Nik's Facebook for everyone to watch at any time. And a big thanks to my mate Lance for stepping in at last minute to help with the AV stuff. Trust me, with the right gear, this guy's a genius. But we're a long way from the modern sound desks that Jeff shared, and even further from Stevie's studio in the Hollywood Hills. Yeah, that pic of Nik and Stevie Nicks you may have seen from his birthday a few years back in her private dressing room at Rod Laver after she'd just sung him a personal happy birthday. Yeah, well that all happened due to my awesome mates Lance and Linda. And it's a moment I know Nik never imagined in his life, in his wildest dreams would ever occur. And the fact that it did blew him away. So thank you for giving him that incredible and completely unforgettable once in a lifetime experience. Love you guys. Just gonna have a sip because I need to. All right, before we really begin, let's just pause, take a few big deep breaths, and just be here, fully present, together in this moment, as we remember, as we grieve, and we celebrate the life of the one and only Nik Bradley. Funerals, memorial services, rituals, they all allow us to acknowledge that sadly someone we know, cared for and or love has indeed died. And coming together, as we have today, can help provide us with the opportunity to reflect on the life that Nik lived and affirm the value of our various different relationships with him throughout his 50 years, and more importantly and relevantly for today's service up here over the last 6. It can hopefully also help in providing a support mechanism for those of it that need it most, offering that comfort in our combined connections to him and each other. And although we are here to honour and celebrate Nik's life, it's so important that we do take that time and acknowledge the real, raw loss and sadness associated with such a shocking, untimely, sudden and ultimately unfair passing. His warmth, his humour, his unfiltered random hilarity, his unending generosity and kindness and willingness to sacrifice himself or personal success for the greater good. Traits and values that will be missed by so many. But in coming together here today, we allow our hearts to recall with fondness the often shambolic and chaotic, but hard-working, innovating, dedicated and giving man that Nik was. The lessons that he taught us and the loads of laughs he gave us, intentionally or otherwise. And in coming together here today, we just must allow our hearts to understand with both softness and with grief that Nik is now gone from this world, from our worlds. So we must, with compassionate understanding, move forward, knowing that grief is such a personal and individual journey, as were each of our relationships with him. We've just got to try and feel Nik with us in all of these moments, the sadness, the sorrow, the tears, and in the winds that blow and bluster us all along this wild, crazy, fucked up whirlwind of grief, especially around these parts. Fuck, you've never experienced wind like it. As most people haven't, till they get here and somehow, on a day like today, manage to fall in love with the place and then get hit with the old Blampy breeze. But we must try to look forward with the hope and the knowledge, as hard as it is to comprehend now, that there will be brighter days to come and the sun will shine again. There will be beautiful sunsets to still enjoy, and that there will be many precious memories of Nik held by all of us forever. He's gone, but he's with us, always. The ultimate dichotomy. So here we are, back in the beautiful, peaceful, pretty chilly Central Highlands, a far cry from the hustle and bustle of last week's service in Melbourne, which was the home of Subterranean Vintage, a seriously cool and ultra-funky vintage clothing shop, started as the brainchild of Caitlin and Nik, that swiftly grew to be a bit of an icon in the scene. With the vintage clothing they were securing, importing and repurposing at the time, they dressed many of Melbourne's coolest, including artists such as Dan Sultan, Claire Bowditch and many more, over the 2 retail stores and thriving eBay businesses. And after Subterranean, there was also the successful East India Trading Company that Nik co-owned and operated with his mum Wendy, importing ceramics, homewares, rugs, many other beautiful pieces, successfully again selling online and retail. 2 businesses that saw Nik spending many of his years around those parts, making many connections within the community as a resident, trader, father, partner, supporter, friend, and an executive position on the Northcote Business Association and High Vibes Festival. Nik just always wanted to contribute and be a part of his community, giving back and supporting. Today, I'm not going to read through the extensive list of Nik's numerous schools and ridiculously eclectic resume, but a brief overview. It does span from early, ultra-corporate ExxonMobil days, the 2 family successful businesses mentioned above, his years swinging in and out of Telstra throughout various departments over many decades, most recently after we had to let go of our little Betty's Cafe. And, of course, pre-COVID, his very successful real estate careers with PRD and Big & Scott. There's something about a prawn truck in the 90s that didn't end well at all, but that's all I'll mention. But there wasn't much Nik wouldn't do to ensure his family was looked after. But his time as a rural agent up here, for sure, was something very special and very different for Nik. Despite his anxieties, he proved himself more than once. There was adventure, plenty of misadventure throughout Nik's life, everywhere from the outskirts and inner suburbs of Melbourne right up to Lismore and back again. And of course, here, where we've gathered to remember who Nik was as a person, to remember his heart, his generosity and his humility, to share in our shock, our loss and our grief. Today, we honour a genuinely kind-hearted, capable, helpful, inspirational man who without doubt leaves a very vast and expansive legacy of love behind him. And let's try and remember that always. That legacy of love, his kindness, and be guided by it in the moments we most need it. It's there, woven within each of us, amongst us all, collectively, throughout so many interesting and unique layers of Nik. As I've said, while we're here to mourn and grieve, we're also here to recognise, celebrate and truly appreciate the incredible human that Nik was, the love that he had for his boys and us, the partner, the friends and family that loved him so dearly and that he treasured with all his heart. We'll hear from Wendy, his mum, and then his dad, Dave. I'll share some words from his beloved Auntie June and cousin Ned. We'll hear from his two beautiful boys, Nicholas and Jasper. Two incredible young men, now finding their worlds tipped upside down without warning, but both doing the most outstanding job of honouring their dad and taking care of themselves and each other like no other siblings I've seen before. I love you guys, and you know that you'll always be your dad's proudest and greatest achievements. Then I'll share with you some special moments from the past 6 years of my time shared with Nik on the farm out at Dubby's. A most unique and unexpected reconnection since we were at high school together some 34 years ago back in Melbourne. I think that's most things covered for now on how today is most likely going to unfold, but who really knows? We've done our best. We'll see how we go. Wendy, when you're ready, come forward, please, and share your experience today.
Okay, can you all hear?
Yes.
Can you hear up the back? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. My name's Wendy. I'm Nik's mum. I was going to talk about Nik's early life. I started to remember anecdotes and funny stories around those years. I tend to hide behind the funny story, a bit like Nik did. We don't like to cry or show how much it hurts. Instead, I decided I needed to tell another story, a different story. I needed to tell you what it is for a mother to have her only child die without warning. I needed to tell you how I was able to let him go. Some of you will know I had to return from London. I found a message from my sister on my Facebook, just a few words, 17th of May, 2023. Call me, ASAP, medical emergency re-Nik. It was not possible to phone or wait for more news. I left within the hour. It was a mad rush to the airport, but I missed the flight. I was desolate. I managed to book another flight leaving later that day. It must have been 40 plus hours of flying and sitting around in airports, trying so hard to hold it together. Wearing a mask and only taking it down to change to a fresh one. I couldn't afford to get COVID. When I got to Tullamarine, my grandsons were waiting for me and we drove straight to Ballarat Base Hospital. I sat by the side of my son Nik. The machines were breathing for him. He looked so peaceful. He looked so young not a line on his face. It was as if, just for once, he was sleeping deeply. I couldn't understand that he would die. They told me everything would be turned off, that when that happened at 1 p.m. on that Sunday, he would die. When that time came, the family sat around his bed. I had my hand on his arm. He was warm. Without thinking it out in advance, I went into a visualisation as they started to prepare him to turn off the life support. His soul body was standing on the threshold of a gateway. He was still, looking into the void of the darkness. I was standing behind him. As the first line of the monitor began to flatline, I silently told him it was time to go. I willed him to step into the darkness, and as he did, his body began to glow with all the love we were pouring into him. As each line on the monitor flatlined, I watched him walking, his body glowing more and more. Finally, he was a pulsating light in the far distance. Slowly, the brightest of light drifted up into the darkness, and suddenly that light burst into a cascade of stars. He was gone. The visualisation has given me comfort and allowed me to accept he was gone. I still need to grieve, and I still haven't been able to. How can a mother grieve the death of a child? How long will it take? Will I ever get acceptance? Will closure ever happen? Who will be there for me if I break down with grief? If I break down, will I ever put the pieces together again? Closure might happen, but only when I take my last breath and I step through the gateway and see him in the far distance. Then I will. I look out at you all. I thank each and every one of you for being here. Those I know and those I don't know. Thank you to those who donated towards the cost of his cremation and his farewells. Money never stuck to Nik, and it was a bad time for all of us to find that money. So many generous people who did not even know Nik, and those who did. Thank you for being here for Nik. Thank you for appreciating what a caring person he was, what a protective father he was to his boys. He made them his main job in his life, and they do him proud. Thank you to Pia, who has given him joy. At this point in my life, when I was leaning on Nik, he never let me down. He sweet-talked his way into hospitals He sweet-talked his way into hospitals in lockdown to advocate for me. He bought me real coffee instead of the awful drink the hospital named coffee. He talked to every head nurse on every shift to make sure they were fully informed about my special medical needs with scleroderma. He stayed with me when they sent me home. To know that he had my back was so comforting and so important, and gave me strength to keep on going. I'm not sure what I do next time when I turn around and he is not there. Goodbye, my darling boy.
None of us could just even imagine being on the other side of the world and getting that news. So thank you for the love and support you've offered me these last 6 years, and specifically your assistance over the last couple of weeks. And as mentioned, I very much look forward to seeing the next round of Wendy Donald artworks on display. And I know just how proud Nik will be of you. as he always was. Now, Dave.
Yeah.
Nick's dad, he'd like to get up and say a few words.
The trouble with these things is you trip over them. But it's all right, I'll pull on the guitars.
We'll do no such thing. I'll protect the guitars.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Nothing prepares you for this, and as they say, what can you say?
Let's try and do
First
that.
thing is, thank you, Pia. I've never seen such love as you're going to cry too.
It's okay.
The 5 days with Nick, and then the next many days you spent taking him, washing him, wrapping him, dressing him, loving him, and taking him to where you knew he'd want to be cremated. That is such a comfort to me that you're able to, and I don't know how you did it. I really don't. But that was, I know he loved you, and I know you loved him, and I've never seen such a, I can't comprehend such a demonstration. It was a strange time, 5 days by the bed. He would have been proud of his boys. The strength Nicholas and Jasper showed that he succeeded. They'd grown up. They had more strength than I did. All their voices have dropped. I think mine's got a bit weaker. That's old age. We all turn into elderly women eventually. Become invisible. Oh goody, it's not mine.
It's not mine.
But it was a strange phenomenon.
It's okay, she's Scottish.
Oh, look, it's in the national call, just take it. I'll hand it the microphone. A silly anecdote, right? A couple of weeks before Nick died, we should all have aged care plans. I'd been nagged into it a couple of years ago, and the doctor got me to refresh it and said, you must tell everybody who's on it. And of course I hadn't told Nick because I didn't, like Nick wouldn't have been an organ donor if you hadn't have finally filled in the paperwork. We're always talking about doing it. And I just said, look, I don't want anything made of a cremation. If anything's horrible and crippling, I don't want to be kept lingering and torturing both myself and the people around me. And he actually said, yeah, Dad, look, I'm exactly the same. I wouldn't want that. And I'm quite sure Piers filled in the donor's card, so he actually gave strength to the decisions to me, and I think everybody, in what we had to do on that. It's an awful decision, but it's such a generous decision, and it still doesn't feel like it, because we still feel robbed. But yeah, there's what a legacy. There's 6 people who've got something from what Nick did. And look, you should all get organ donor cards. You should all do it, because it could be your own child's life. It could be you that end up if the system works. But it's just what it is. Anyway, Pia, your love amazed me. It humiliated me. It left me feeling bewildered that you could go on such a long and loving journey with him. And Nicholas came with you and helped, which such strength shows something. Might explain. I've tried to write some poems, so I hope I can read them. Tears make very good lenses,
Read us out.
1 p.m. departure. We'd been there for 5 days, waiting to see him off, and they arrived right on time. Gently the nurses, who had cared for him with such kindness, removed the wires and the tubes, the needles and the drips and the sticking plaster and so many of the machines that cluttered the room, except the one that fed his lungs. And then they gently wiped his face and asked, were we ready? Yes, of course we would never be ready. How could you be? But we knew he was ready to go, and we all said yes. The tube slid out, and he left us so quietly, so easily, so gently. As his pink lips turned blue, the love of his life held his hand tight to her breast, held his head tight to her breast, and I thought of his locked-in thoughts and memories and dreams unwinding and soaking into her heart and into her hands and escaping from their prison of the last week to go where he needed them to be, and she needed them to be, and it seemed so right. And the rest of him set off in so many directions, to be met by so many strangers he would never know, to keep his promise, and we can only wish them well. And all I can say, for what you've been going through, I could just pick up the phone and ring him, but he won't be there. Thank you. Thank you. One more. Look, why don't I just occupy the whole stage?
You got 2 minutes.
2 minutes, all right. What is it? It's a sort of a signal.
153.
Long time. By your bed we sat 5 days with love and tears and memories until your time to leave with a purpose. Touched by all our hands, you left your family so gently. By 5 beds today, 5 families sit with love and hope and dreams. You did that, darling boy. And this needs to be here because Nick's always been very generous and kind to people. He was a very giving person. We all feel walking past homeless people and beggars and we don't quite know what to do. And Nick gave me the answer to that. He said, Dad, you always have some $2 coins in your pocket because none of them would be there begging if they're not there because they want to be. And it was interesting because I realised he'd opened my eyes to a fear that blocks empathy and sympathy, and you blame and judge people. So I'll have to read. He had promises to keep to strangers, but that was him. No matter how short of $1, always coins in his pocket to give a hard-up person on the street to strangers without judgment. He had promises to keep to strangers he'd never know, and we clung to him as a machine kept him breathing in and out in the most gentle sleep we'd ever seen him have for days and days, until we gently let him go with love. He had promises to keep to strangers he'd never know. Now, I'd have never got through this without Nick heckling me. Would I? Seriously. And
15 seconds.
I was going to try and heckle myself, but
It's all right.
geez, what a bastard of a thing to do, just to get out of having to, go to your own funeral, but to bloody die.
It's a bit rough, isn't it?
Thanks, Kevin. Thank you so much. Amazing.
Thank you very much. Don't forget that one.
Oh,
Don't forget. I know we could just write poems for days and days and weeks and still not enough words. But I'm going to share some quick words from Nick's Auntie June, Wendy's sister. When I was 15 when Nick was born and super proud to be an auntie. Together with my mum Peg, we rushed down to the hospital to see him lined up with all the other babies in the nursery. Peg looked at him and said, "He can't be ours, he's got red hair." But ours he was. All during Nick's early years, he relied heavily on his beloved Grandma Peg. He lived between the 2 homes, one with Dave and Wendy, and the other with Peg and family. I regularly babysat him over the long Christmas holidays, under the careful eye of Peg. She adored babies and young children, and modestly described it as her one talent. She was totally child-centred, and with endless patience and love. She took Nick with her everywhere. He was devastated when she died. He was only 18 and starting to make his way in the world. I know that Peg would have been so proud of the person Nick grew to be, specifically the wonderful father that he became. Like her, he had endless patience, care and love for his 2 boys. They were always his priority. And June, thank you. I know how strong your bond was with Nick. He adored you so much. And thank you for your help again over these last several weeks, making some pretty tough calls and stepping up or in when I just simply couldn't. Much love, always. And Ned, June and Jack's son, Nick's cousin, wrote a beautiful tribute to his honorary godfather, and it's my honour to share these words with you all. My cousin, my godfather, my mentor, an inspiration for all. The care for those is an instinct like no other. A true musician and punk rocker. My mentor, I'd be nowhere without you. Through my darkest days you fought for me. Support just a phone call away. Diplomatic with every word and hanging out, putting a smile on my face. Your words and what I learnt from you, I will live every single day as life goes on. As an autistic person, growing up was a challenge, but you taught me what I actually needed in life. From a child, you encouraged my music and made sure I was sent to the right tutor, Colin Badger, because you had faith in me. After a traumatic experience, you fought with every part of your heart in getting my rights back and also how to move forward positively every time I was in a rut. His music, which captured what music was made for, true, and just capturing what's actually real. An OG of 90s true pub rock and punk. Big hole in my heart, living on in all you gave me. Thank you, Ned, again for letting me share such honest and beautiful words from your heart about Nick and the relationship you both shared. Like we've chatted about, mate. This sure is going to take some getting used to, but we got this. As we get ready to watch the first of today's visual tributes to Nick, with images from Wendy and Dave and June's archives, I encourage all of us gathered here to just allow our emotions to be free. Have a laugh, have a cry. We're all here to collectively mourn the tragic loss and to celebrate the incredible life of Nick. You're amongst friends, family and community. Feel safe to feel whatever you're feeling. Plenty of tissues scattered around, so help yourselves. When you're ready, lads, thank you. What a beautiful, beautiful bunch of images of a young and very cheeky Nick to see and reflect upon in such a fitting song. But now it's time for me to proudly introduce to you all Nicholas and Jasper, Nick's two sons, to offer their words of love, memories and tribute to their dad. When you guys are ready, the floor's yours.
Alright, is it good? Perfect. Don't have it memorised, so on the phone.
It'll print it out.
Yeah. Good day everyone. Can't thank you enough for being here today. Sharing the space with so many people who knew and were touched by our dad is humbling and a testament to the far-reaching impact of his life. We look forward to sharing with you a bit of who he was to us as his sons, and appreciate your presence here as we try and capture what made Dad, Dad.
Dad, or as he would prefer, Nik the Lick Bradley, was a man of many hats, the ultimate jack of all trades with a resume to match. Just a few of them being small business owner, musician, apprentice chef, Australia's best real estate agent in the world, as determined by a democratic vote in 2020, firefighter and abattoir worker. You can forgive Dad for not being able to stomach chicken for years after that. But to us, he was Dad.
Funny, silly, a little bit aloof, but with a heart overflowing with love. He was the kind of dad who would sit down to help you with your homework, get stuck on the first question and suggest we all just eat junk food and watch TV instead. He was the stoic advisory steadfast figure when you really needed it, but for the rest of the time he was our best friend and always the clown.
He had a tendency to put us through what I can only call sadistic kindness pranks. For example, one time he transformed our commute home from school into a bizarre McDonald's marathon, an event in which Dad carefully calculated a route home that would take us to as many McDonald's drive-thrus as possible. And each time, ordered a round of small cheeseburger meals. The only sense I've been able to make of this scheme is that either Dad wanted to make us eat so many cheeseburgers that we never begged for McDonald's on the way home from school ever again, or that he just really wanted to gorge on cheeseburgers.
Little from column A, little from column B.
Yeah.
As his sons, we knew a very different Nick than a lot of you would, but we would always catch glimpses of what I would call cool Dad. A certain air of swagger in the morning when he'd chuck on his suit, the distinctive crack of a charming joke at the cafes he'd local, or maybe even an Anthony Bourdain-esque towel over his shoulder while he was cooking up a meal. But in between these two worlds of Dad and cool Dad, I think was the person we all knew and loved.
A person who would always put other people first. Nothing put a goofy smile on his face faster than seeing those that he loved thrive. And he would always do whatever he could to help them pursue their goals and passions. Whether it was us two writing music, our grandma Wendy putting on an art exhibition, Dad was always your biggest fan, and he celebrated the success of those close to him as if it was his own. And when things weren't going so well, he was there for you straight away. A willing ear for your woes, a sage offering sensible advice, or a knight in shining armour to rescue you from your own mistakes, though not without a theatrical eye roll.
My knight in shining armour moment came when I knocked on death's door on a road trip through New South Wales. I made a critical mistake. I ordered seafood at a pub 4 hours from the nearest ocean. It was a traumatic experience for myself and for those around me who had to witness feats of vomiting thought impossible outside of 1973's The Exorcist. Ever the hero, arriving so quickly it challenged even the idea of a speed limit, Dad was there, ushering me into the car and having me on my way home. And I'm barely conscious. I'm just clinging onto life, the rocking and swaying of the car on the highways, making another Exorcist level event feel inevitable. Suddenly, indicator, brakes. Could we be home so soon? No. Obviously Dad had made a 45-minute detour to defunct novelty Australiana pub, Edamoga Pub. As quickly as I was ushered into the car and on my way home, I was ushered out of the car and posing in front of the cartoonish Edamoga Pub lockup, and a photo was taken. I hate to admit it, but after that I was feeling a whole lot better. Cheers, Dad.
Dad was always full of ideas, and although he wasn't always the best at following through on them, once he got the ball rolling, he wouldn't let anything get in his way. His ideas were his babies, and by that logic, our siblings. Subterranean, East India Company, Betty's Cafe, all examples that I'm sure you're familiar with. But for us, nothing illustrates this better than Dad's famous Echuca camping trip.
Like all the best plans, it was loosely put together in a few days, with a heavy dose of "no worries, we'll figure it out" mixed in. It hit Dad like a lightning bolt on the Tuesday. Boys, this weekend, camping, Echuca. For the rest of the week, we could barely contain our excitement as Dad's vision became increasingly ambitious. We were talking a proper camping trip, fishing, campfires, boating, the lot. With zero camping gear to our name, Dad went all in, spending the week in a mad dash buying up every bit of gear he could think of.
It was the day before we were meant to leave when tragedy struck. Someone sideswiped our car, leaving the front bumper dangling off. Dad didn't seem anywhere near as worried as we did, and one phone call later, our grandpa Dave showed up with a solution in the form of 5 rolls of duct tape.
Good job, Dad.
A few kicks and shakes confirmed that the repair was solid enough, and by lunchtime the next day we were cooking sausages on a campfire by the Murray. We didn't catch any fish. Blame went partially to the locals flogging a jet ski up and down the river, but for the three of us it was the story that came up time and time again.
We never managed to get out on another camping trip, but I doubt anything the two of us put together could come close to capturing the magic of a patented Nik Bradley plan.
Obviously, it's impossible to sum up our relationship with Dad in one speech. All we really can do is emphasise that he was the best dad that we could have hoped for, and that we felt his love every day of our lives, and we'll go on loving him for the rest of ours.
We're not done yet. We're not done. I mean, we can be. I think a good note to end on is a bit of advice that Dad would hand out often on how to play a good gig. Advice that I think reflected his overall attitude towards life. Keep it simple. If you don't know what you're doing, turn the volume on your guitar down. And most importantly, make sure everyone knows you're having a good time.
Thank you for everything. Just everything. So, getting my shit together here. What we will be doing now is checking out a range of images of Nik as a loving, caring dad, spending time with his family. And just a few as his teenage dirtbag self, of course. I'm sure you'll work out which ones are which. And again, same rules apply as before. Tissues, safety, community, here, okay? Feel free to just let the tears go. So, when you're ready, Lance, that second last image, that was Nik and his two boys enjoying a night out at the Forum in Melbourne, catching Regurgitator and Custard, the artist who performed that song, 2 days before his stroke. It's the last proper photo of Nik ever taken. And it's so fortunate that Victoria's mum insisted they take it. Thank you, Nik, wherever you are. Thank you for your insistence on that occasion, and also for the support you've been able to provide Jasper since Nik's death. Okay, I'm going to have a sip now, because it's my turn. I'll try and make this as brief as possible, but for the relatively 6 short years, there's a lot to cover, including so much I won't begin to chat about here. But after my ramblings about living with Nik and loving Nik these last 6 years, we'll watch the final slideshow compilation, a bunch of random pics from the life and the adventures of Nik's life up here on the farm and his recently discovered Thailand, with another very, very special song. Nik Bradley, the boy who kissed me when I was 14. A very mature 14-year-old, almost 15. But anyway, I was knocking about with a pretty rough and motley crew, courtesy of being 4 years younger than my then 18-year-old sister Jackie. And I was crushing hard. But on the advice of a well-meaning friend of Nik's, that's all we were to share, that one car park kiss, as apparently the age difference was far too controversial at the time, and Nik was just far too much of a gentleman. We all know that. So on went our lives, in totally different directions for 28 years, until the 30th of June, 6 years ago, at the Croxton Park Hotel in Melbourne. Radio Birdman died pretty well on the bill, and I knew Sky and Chris, 2 ex-students I had maintained contact with, were all for it, especially when they knew my mate Lance was able to get us backstage wristbands. So it was arranged, dinner and the gig. Except my anxiety was off the Richter before the time I'd arrived, and it took some pretty hefty convincing from my friend Sky to get me to agree to go beyond getting them their wristbands and just running back home. That convinced me he did, and I'll thank him forever. Because much later in the night, much later, Chris had already bailed earlier, Sky and I were outside in the courtyard having one last ciggy before I was to drop him back home. And it was in that moment I heard an oddly familiar voice. Pretty drunk, wasted, loud, obnoxious voice in the courtyard. And in a flash, I just turned around and I blurted out, "Nik fucking Bradley." His response, "Peter Sims, I kissed you when you were 14. I offered a smart-ass, quick-witted reply, which I won't repeat here. But his next offering, "Well, will you marry me?" "You smashed, mate, not a chance." Cool, was my gracious and polite answer to that absurd proposal. So we laughed and we chatted for a while, and we swapped numbers, him begging me not to go. But I promised my mate Sky I was going to drop him home and I wasn't going to let him down. And not so secretly, I was kind of happy to have myself a smug little out. And leave the bugger hanging. It was only fair after all that time, really. So with a happy hug and the promise of a call in the next few days, I rounded up a pretty wasted Sky and we headed for the door, leaving Nik behind. Sky and I got to just outside the entrance and something just made me stop. I handed Sky to the bouncer and I said, "Just please don't let him get hit by a tram, I'll be back in a minute, I promise." As I ran back inside, spotted Nik in exactly the same spot I'd left him. Went up and I gave him the biggest pash, and I turned around and I walked away, collecting Sky as promised and dropping him back at Chris's. By the time I'd reached home, of course, there were texts from Nik, "Come back, come back," which I pretended to ignore. For fuck's sake, mate, you wasted, it was 4 a.m. and you did have to work the next day. And selfishly, I just wanted to lay in my bed alone, processing and soaking in the bizarre and blissful surprise encounter that had just happened. And glowed to myself that I got that last kiss in. Not that we were competitive much at all. But a few days later, we arranged to meet for dinner. Again, my anxiety was racing, but for so many reasons, but also being unfamiliar with the current day Melbourne traffic at the time. I was running late. I never run late. I was mortified, but he was cool, and I eventually got there, flustered, but the conversation began, and it just flowed so damn easily. When the waitress asked for our drinks order, apparently I completely threw Nik off guard when I declined a wine. Asked for a lemonade and casually mentioned I didn't drink booze. I often forget that some people think it's weird upon first learning it. His hopes for a drunken pity shag shattered in an instant. Well, lucky for him, he's a funny bastard. He'd offered to pay for dinner, and needless to say, the non-drinking wasn't an issue, and pity did not come into it. We continued on to have a few more dates when I started freaking out about how totally unready I was for this, as was he. But fuck, 28 years of wondering, worlds colliding like they did. What do? You have a go, that's what you do. So we did. And it certainly wasn't without its many and various challenges. Geographical, logistical, societal, emotional, to name a few. But somehow, the universe just kept making us be together the natural choice. I could go on about the synchronicity and serendipity of so many things through that initial period. Our jobs lining up as they did, me with FW Barnes, Nik with PRD Creswick, and Tash resigning, and the amazing farmhouse we've been blessed to call home, that the beautiful Sprocket helped us out with, connecting us with the wonderful Mackays. Paradise. We've been lucky to live in absolute paradise. We were both just astounded at how things were falling into place. Not something either of us had had much experience with. But ultimately, despite all our hesitations and reservations, Nik moved up to the country, much sooner than anticipated by a number of months, and we embarked on our lives at Juddy's. Quite the change from the Bell Street commute he'd been grinding away at for years previously. Here he was, the new boy in town, the new face, PRD Real Estate Creswick. And he had his sceptics, plenty of them, and rightly so. I mean, here he was, the boy, straight from the suburbs of Melbourne, out there sometimes appraising massive rural properties, all while being intimidated by my Cox ride-on lawnmower at home. It was quite comical. And he must have known something, because whenever the poor bastard did have a go, it will always end up in a frantic but trying to keep it together call to either myself or Russell, asking how to turn off such and such a valve or a tank, as he might have just run over another piece of poly or connector again. So big thanks to Paul at Davies and Rose for all of his help over the years with the extra tricky ones, mate. But despite his lack of confidence riding my big Cox, yes, pun intended, Nik, as you all know, in time, won most of those sceptics over with his honesty, his integrity, his ethics, his humour, his wit, and what I like to call his uniqueness. Just Nik being Nik. Combined with winning various agent and agency awards and earning further respect in the industry, joining the Kingston CFA Brigade, being the face of Captain Koala, which will make a lot more sense a little bit later on. He'll just be missed by so many, an entire community here, one that he'd become an integral part of these last 6 years. And there's no way I can put into words in just a few more minutes about the many journeys, learning curves and wild adventures that Nik and I shared in our various shifting dynamics over the past 6 years. But I have to finish with this, that without doubt, the most challenging period for us was since the death of my beautiful 21-year-old niece Maya 21 months ago, out of nowhere. This changed everything in my world, and of course, out of sheer survival, self-sabotage, stupidity, I pushed Nik away as a result. But he steadfastly stood by me, as he always did, giving me space, offering love, comfort and support when I allowed myself to ask and receive it. He helped us tirely with the preparation of my sister Jackie's property for sale following Maya's death. And he was always willing to help with the dirty work and never complaining, and always enjoying the rides on the Fergie, on the carryall, waving like a kid at a carnival. He'd bonded with the team, with the herd of horses, firmly earned his stripes as a part of Team Sims, with his love, dedication and support, not only for me, but for my family as well. And we were so blessed to have him. And after all this struggle, this endless hard yakka, because of course, there was the dream of opening the cafe, only then having to sell and walk away from that. Motherfucking COVID, my hospital admissions, diagnosis, surgeries, long, really long recoveries, and every other universal what the fuck we copped. We were finally making our way back to us. After almost agreeing to part ways with Love and Grace a year ago. But we didn't. We'd made it through the shittest of the shit, and we had proven that we were invincible. And we were due to fly out to Thailand in 3 days. Time, just us together, away from everything. Nothing but beach, sunshine, relaxing, resetting, reconnecting, and looking forward to excitingly discussing our next chapters, whatever they may be. But for the past few weeks, instead of planning hire cars, massages, airport transfers, ferries, I've been planning and writing today and last week's services. Pretty shit trade-off, I reckon. Especially topped off by the call from my ex-husband Brad the other week. Knowing the Thailand trip wasn't happening and accepting I couldn't possibly go on my own, I'd spoken with Brad, my ex-husband, about heading up to Bright to spend some time with our dog buddy. A very successful shared custody arrangement since our split in 2014-15 when we lived on our property over on the Warona Kingston Road. And Buddy loved his time with Nik, just as Nik loved his time with Bud. They were such great mates. Buddy was only 13 and a half years old, but not old. But he died in Brad's arms, suffering, oddly, what sounded very similar to Nik's stroke a few weeks after Nik died. And I'm just still trying to come to terms with all of that. But Nik, ultimately, we know what our love was and wasn't, and what it always will be. Pure, unconditional, and totally unconventional. It belonged to us. With all my heart, I love you, Nik Bradley. Some images from the farm. To each and every one of you, thank you all again sincerely for being here today, to listening to us all ramble on about our beautiful Nik. And watching at home on the Facebook, watching later on Scott's amazingly put together film, just thank you. And just know that your presence and support is genuinely appreciated by all of us. I do hope in my heart that as the days and the weeks go by, that our grief be softened and our memories of Nik become a source of comfort. And I encourage and ask you to help and support and love those of us who grieve the most. Allow us to cry, to hurt, to smile and remember. To remember our Nik in whatever ways we need to. Grief works through systems in its own time. It's not a linear journey. And as challenging as it may prove to be, I know it's going to be a challenge. We must try and remember to somehow bless each day and live it to the full, or at least some small part of it, in honour of our beloved Nik. None of us know the full truth about lies what beyond death, but what we do know is that this life that was lived by Nik lives on in all of us in a multitude of ways. All of our lives have been touched and made more beautiful for having known him in whatever capacity. He was just an exceptional human. Perfect? Nope. Not by a long shot. So, funny though, one of the things I'm missing the most is wiping the smeared peanut butter across the kitchen counter. But I doubt anyone here who would be without sin or occasional silly decision or slip of the knife. But his heart and his soul were pure, and he lived to help people. So of course it stands to reason that in his death, as mentioned earlier, as a registered organ donor, Nik would continue to help others. We know his 2 kidneys have been transplanted to 2 adult males. His liver also to an adult male. His corneas restoring sight for 2 people. And his heart valves and tissue donations will assist patients and researchers for years to come. I want to thank Nicholas and Jasper for their strength, love and support throughout this whole breaking, fucked up ordeal. But especially in their wish to meet with the Donate Life team, with me, to ensure that Nik's wishes were respected, so that all of this could occur and that so many lives could be improved and changed as a result of the loss of their amazing dad. Giving us a glimmer, a thread, some form of peace to reconcile by removing a fraction of the fucked up futility of Nik's premature, unfair and simply bullshit death. A death is the end of a life, but it doesn't have to be the end of a relationship. Although it currently feels like it, I won't lie. Knowing we'll never see each other again is taking some pretty brutal getting used to. Home just doesn't feel the same, and I doubt it ever will. And my heart is shattered. We had so many chapters to write. So I thought. But we must all keep sharing these good memories, the great, the bad, the funny, and the totally fucked up, all of them. We must keep feeling this genuine love and connection all of us today, here and at home, have for Nik, inside our hearts and our minds. And we must continue to speak his name often. Nik, you've been battling intense vertigo and migraines for some time, and I saw firsthand the impact it was having on your day-to-day life. Fueling your anxiety, contributing to a sense of hopelessness and despondency by the dismissiveness of various doctors and specialists. You'd had a CT scan a number of months ago. We're due to have an appointment with the GP in late May to arrange an MRI, and we're looking to meet with a neurologist as soon as possible. But you had your catastrophic stroke on Tuesday the 16th. At home, we laughed and joked as only we could in such a shit situation. waiting for that ambulance to arrive, sharing absurd conversations to have as our last. But I wouldn't want any other memory if I have to have any of that night at all. We were together. You were not alone. You knew that you were loved. And somehow we were still laughing, despite the intensity of the situation. Typical us. You were kept alive with the assistance of machines until Sunday the 21st. Surrounded by love, we had to let you go that afternoon. Your body was tenderly and reverently committed to be cremated back to Mother Nature's keeping here at Ballarat on the 2nd of June by the purifying element of fire. And Nik, it was my honour to be with you until the very end, freeing you from any and all earthly burdens, allowing your spirit to truly move where it next needs to be, with peace, love and grace. Today we've come together here in the beautiful region you were blessed to call home and appreciated for the last 6 years. A place that gave you space, the freedom and a reason to breathe. And we've gathered to show our love, respect, appreciation and admiration for you. And I hope I've done you proud. And I promise you, Nik, nor you nor your memory will ever be forgotten. I'll ask in a moment if we turn our attention one final time to the screens as we watch a little bit of footage to close off today's official memorial service for Nik. Footage sent to me by him from his solo 50th birthday trip to Thailand last year, with the support, encouragement and freedom to do so. As you saw a few snippets earlier and all over our Facebook and Instagram, Nik and I shared so many incredible sunsets on the farm, looking out over Mount Murukau, Kuruchiang, and even over just to the back there, a little bit of Mount Franklin. But this sunset was particularly special. It was one for himself, by himself, as mentioned, with the freedom to do so, and it could not have been any further from our front veranda. Fuck, I was really looking to share some similar ones with him next week from our little beachfront villa, but not to be. In total shock, sadness, anger and grief at his passing, but with hearts full of gratitude for his life, be it all too short, we say, see you later, Nik. We thank you and we love you. Thanks again, everyone, for coming today. Sincerely.
don't think this is going to work, Scott.
Why?